You know what's wild? I was sitting in my car in a Walmart parking lot 3 years ago, crying so hard I couldn't breathe because my college roommate had just posted photos of his brand new house, his beautiful wife, his 2 kids, and a promotion at a Fortune 500 company. And I was 31 years old eating a gas station sandwich because I couldn't afford anything else. And I remember thinking, God, what did I do wrong? Where did I mess up? Because by every measurement the world had handed me, by every invisible scorecard I had been carrying around since I was a teenager, I was losing. I was behind. I was late. And that feeling, that crushing, suffocating feeling of being left behind, is one of the most painful things a human being can experience. And if you've ever felt it, if you ever scrolled through someone else's highlight reel and felt your stomach sink, felt that quiet shame crawl up your spine, felt the whisper in the back of your mind saying you should be further along by now, then I need you to stay with me through every single word of what I'm about to share with you, because this might be the most important thing you hear all year. We live in a world that has handed us a timeline. Think about it. It starts early. By the time you're 5, you're supposed to be in kindergarten. By 12, middle school. By 18, graduation. By 22, a college degree. By 25, a career with benefits. By 28, married. By 30, a house. By 35, kids, a retirement account. Maybe a vacation home, if you're really crushing it. And if you check every box on schedule, the world pats you on the head and calls you successful. But the moment you miss a deadline, the moment life happens and the boxes don't get checked, the world doesn't comfort you. The world looks at you sideways. And worse than what the world says is what you start to say to yourself. You start to believe you're broken. You start to believe you missed your window. You start to believe that the door you were supposed to walk through is closed now, and everyone else already went inside, and you're standing out in the cold wondering how you got so far behind. But I want to introduce you to something today. A different kind of clock. A clock that doesn't tick the way ours does. A clock that doesn't measure in years and quarters and fiscal deadlines. A clock that has been running since before the mountains were formed, before the oceans filled their basins, before the first human being opened their eyes and drew breath. And the person who designed that clock, the one who set in motion, he has never once been late. Not a single time in the entire history of the universe. And he's not about to start being late with you. Moses was 40 years old when he thought his moment had come. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave, and something rose up in him. That fire, that sense of destiny, that feeling like this is it. This is the moment I was born for. And he acted, and it went terribly wrong. He ended up fleeing into the desert, a fugitive, a failure by every measurable standard. And for the next 40 years, people, he tended sheep in the wilderness. He didn't lead a nation. He didn't perform miracles. He didn't stand before Pharaoh. He herded sheep. And I want you to really sit with that for a second, because I think we skip over it too quickly. 40 years. If Moses had a social media account, his feed would have gone completely dark. No updates. No wins. No announcements. Just silence. And the world would have written him off. The people who knew him would have shaken their heads and said, "Remember Moses? He had so much potential. What happened to him? He used to be something. Now he's just out there in the desert somewhere, taking care of sheep, totally wasted." And Moses might have believed them. He might have sat there in that wilderness, watching the sun set over the sand, wondering if his life had amounted to anything at all. And then he was 80 years old. 80. And God showed up in a burning bush and said, Now is your moment. Now is what all of this was building toward. Go to Pharaoh. Led my people out of Egypt. The moment Moses had been born for didn't arrive at 40. It arrived at 80. And if Moses had spent those 40 years in the wilderness poisoning himself with comparison, scrolling through the metaphorical success stories of everyone around him, collapsing under the weight of a timeline he couldn't meet, if he had given up and decided his moment was never coming, the entire exodus wouldn't have happened. Generations of people would have remained in chains because one man couldn't trust that his waiting season had a purpose. Your waiting season has a purpose. I need you to hear that. Not as a nice thing someone says when they don't know what else to say. Not as a spiritual bumper sticker. As a fundamental, bone-deep, life-altering truth. The season you're in right now, the one that looks like nothing, the one that feels like being passed over and overlooked and left behind. That season is doing something in you that the fast lane could never do. The wilderness teaches you things the palace can't. The waiting room builds something in you that the stage destroys if you walk onto it too soon. There are things God is forming in your character, in your capacity, in your ability to handle what's coming, that can only be forged in the fire of not yet. Think about Abraham. God told Abraham he would be the father of a great nation, and Abraham believed it. And then he waited, and waited, and waited. Years passed, decades passed. He and Sarah grew old, and the world, or the version of the world that existed then, would have looked at this old man and his old wife and said, "That ship has sailed. That window is closed. It's biologically impossible now. It's too late. Give up the dream. Let it go. Move on." And Abraham must have felt it. He must have had days where the doubt crept in, where the math didn't add up, where the promise felt like something he'd imagined rather than something he'd received. He must have looked at his own aging body and thought, How? How is this supposed to happen now? And then, when it was the most impossible, when every human logic said the moment had passed, when there was no earthly explanation for how it could still happen, Isaac was born, the promised child, the one who would carry the lineage forward. And he didn't come when Abraham was young and strong, and the world said the timing made sense. He came when only God could get the credit. He came when the miracle would be undeniable. He came right on time. I want to talk to you about something that we don't discuss enough in this culture of hustle and productivity and morning routines and 5-year plans. I want to talk to you about the violence of comparison, because that's what it is. It's violent. When you spend your life measuring your chapter 3 against someone else's chapter 20, you're doing violence to yourself. You are taking the story God is writing, a story with its own unique arc, its own rising action, its own climax and resolution, and you're trying to force it into someone else's format. And it doesn't fit. It was never supposed to fit. Because your story isn't their story. Your path isn't their path. Your purpose isn't their purpose. And the timeline God has designed for fulfillment of your specific calling in this specific generation, for these specific people you are meant to reach and love and impact, that timeline is custom made. It cannot be compared. It should not be compared. And every time you sit down and play that comparison game, you are essentially telling God that you know better than he does. You are telling the architect of time and eternity that his schedule is wrong. And friend, with all the love I have for you, that's a losing argument. I know someone watching this right now is carrying something that feels impossibly heavy. Maybe you've been believing for something for so long that the hope itself has become exhausting. Maybe you prayed for something at 22 and you're 47 now, and it still hasn't come, and you don't even know what to do with that anymore. Maybe you had a plan, a beautiful, careful, detailed plan, and life shattered it, and you've been trying to pick up the pieces for years while everyone around you seems to be sailing forward effortlessly. Maybe it's a marriage that hasn't come. Maybe it's healing that hasn't arrived. Maybe it's a business that failed, a degree that got interrupted, a dream that got deferred so many times you're not even sure you're allowed to dream it anymore. Maybe someone in your family told you it was too late. Maybe a doctor gave you a timeline that felt like a sentence. Maybe you're in a season where the evidence of your eyes is screaming that it's over and you're trying, desperately trying, to hold on to faith while the wind tries to rip it out of your hands. This is for you. Specifically, right now, God's clock is not broken. God's clock is not running slow. God's clock is not calibrated to the same system as the world's clocks, and it never has been. The same God who formed the entire universe in 6 days and rested on the 7th. The same God who parted the Red Sea at exactly the moment it needed to be parted. The same God who sent man in the wilderness every single morning without fail, right on time, every time. That God is the one who holds your life in his hands. And he does not miss deadlines. He does not forget appointments. He does not lose track of the promises he has made to you. Joseph knew something about this. Joseph was his father's favorite son, and he had a dream, a vivid, powerful, unmistakable dream, that one day people would bow before him. And then everything in his life went in the exact opposite direction. His brothers betrayed him. He was sold into slavery. He served faithfully in Potiphar's house, and was falsely accused and thrown into prison. He interpreted a dream for a fellow prisoner, and asked only to be remembered and he was forgotten. Year after year, the promises of his dreams seemed not just delayed but actively contradicted. Every circumstance shouted that it was never going to happen. The pit, the slave market, the prison, the forgotten favor. And then, at exactly the moment God had ordained, not a year early, not a year late, Pharaoh had a dream that no one could interpret, and the cupbearer finally remembered Joseph. And in a single day, Joseph went from the prison to the palace, second in command in Egypt. And every single thing that had looked like a detour was actually the road. The betrayal was the road. The slavery was the road. The prison was the road. The forgotten favor was the road. Because without all of it, without every painful, confusing, seemingly senseless piece of it, Joseph wouldn't have been in Egypt. He wouldn't have been in Pharaoh's prison. He wouldn't have been positioned to interpret the dream. He wouldn't have been there to save his family and the generations that came from them, and ultimately the lineage through which everything else would unfold. What looked like abandonment was actually assignment. What looked like punishment was actually preparation. What looked like the end was actually the entrance. I need to say something that might be uncomfortable, and I'm going to say it with as much compassion as I can. The timeline you think you should be on, the one you mapped out in your head, the one the world handed you, the one social media reinforces every single day, that timeline was never yours. You borrowed it. You absorbed it. You internalized it from a culture that measures worth in output and milestone and visible achievement. And that culture has no idea what God has placed inside you. That culture cannot see the full map. That culture doesn't know what season you're in spiritually or what's being built in you right now. That will be absolutely essential for where you're going. The world's timeline is designed for average, and you are not designed for average. You were designed for a purpose that is specific and profound and cannot be rushed into maturity before it's ready, any more than you can rush a pregnancy and call it fine. Some things have a gestation period. Some things have to develop in the dark before they can survive the light. And the darkness doesn't mean God has abandoned the process. It means the process is happening. I remember a conversation I had with an old pastor years ago, a man who had walked with God for decades and had the kind of peaceful certainty in his eyes that you don't manufacture. It's either earned or it isn't. And I was going through a season where nothing seemed to be moving. I had been working toward a goal for what felt like forever, and every door was closed, and I couldn't understand it. And I sat across from him, and I said, I feel like everyone is moving forward, and I'm just standing still. And he looked at me for a long moment, and he said, have you ever watched a bow being pulled back? He said, when an archer draws the bow, the arrow moves backward. And to the arrow, if it could feel anything, that must feel like the opposite of forward motion. That must feel like losing ground, like going the wrong direction, like being left behind by every arrow that was shot before it. But that tension, that drawing back, that backward motion, that's the very thing that's about to launch it further than it has ever gone. He said, some people see the drawing back and they think God is pulling away, but he's loading. He's loading you. He's pulling you back so that when he releases you, you will go places that no one who got an easy ride will ever reach. I haven't forgotten that conversation. I don't think I ever will. Because here is what I know about God's timing that the world's timeline will never understand. God is not just thinking about where you're going. He's thinking about who you're going to meet when you get there. He's thinking about the person who will need to hear your specific story of waiting and trusting and not giving up. He's thinking about the child they're going to raise and the faith they're going to need and how they're going to learn it by watching how you handle this exact season. He's thinking about the moment 5 years from now when you're on the other side of this, and someone sits across from you who is exactly where you are right now, and what it will mean to them to hear you say, I know how this feels. I know the weight of this. And I made it through, and so will you. He is writing a story through your life that is bigger than the chapter you're currently in. And the chapter you're currently in is not wasted. It is not filler. It is not God killing time until the real stuff starts. It is load-bearing. It is essential. It is doing something that you will not fully understand until you're on the other side of it. And then you will look back and see it so clearly that it will take your breath away. I want to talk to you for a moment about the comparison trap, because I think it's one of the most effective weapons the enemy uses against people who have genuine purpose. Here's how it works. You have a calling. You have a dream that was placed in you by God, something real and specific and meaningful, and you start walking toward it. And for a season, things move. There's excitement and momentum, and you feel like you're on the right track. And then things slow down, or stop, or reverse. And right at that moment, right when you're vulnerable and confused and questioning, you look around, and you see someone else, maybe someone you know personally, maybe someone you follow online, and they are absolutely thriving. They're announcing things. They're celebrating milestones. They're glowing with the kind of joy that comes from watching your life come together exactly the way you hoped. And something curdles inside you. It's not quite jealousy. It's darker than that. And it's mixed with something sadder, which is a creeping belief that their success is evidence of your failure, that their window opening is evidence of yours closing, that God is blessing them and not you. And that belief is a lie. It is a lie designed to knock you off your path. It is a lie designed to make you give up on something God hasn't given up on. Other people's blessings are not your subtraction. Someone else's answered prayer is not proof that God isn't hearing yours. God does not have a limited supply of favor that he distributes on a first-come, first-served basis. He is not running out of good things. He is not stingy. He is not playing favorites. He is moving in every life according to a plan that accounts for every detail, every wound, every gift, every assignment, every generation that came before, and every generation that will come after. And his plan for your neighbor's life does not compete with his plan for your life. Those plans are not in conflict. There is room for all of it. There is abundance for all of it. And when you can look at someone else's breakthrough and genuinely celebrate it, when you can look at someone else getting what you've been praying for and say, God, if you did it for them, I know you can do it for me. That's when something shifts in your spirit. That's when the comparison becomes fuel instead of poison. That's when you stop being a victim of someone else's timeline and start standing firm in your own. There is a story I want to tell you that happened to someone close to me. She had been trying to have a baby for 6 years. 6 years of treatments and hope and crushing disappointment, and the particular kind of grief that lives in the space between trying and failing over and over. And she watched every friend she'd get pregnant, some of them more than once, and she smiled at the baby showers and held new babies and drove home alone and sat in her car in her driveway and cried until there was nothing left. And people said things to her, well-meaning things, the things people say when they don't know what else to say, and some of those things helped and a lot of them didn't. And there were moments where she said she genuinely didn't know if she could keep trusting, not because she stopped believing God was real, but because the silence had gone on so long that she didn't know what to do with it anymore. And then, in year 7, she got pregnant, naturally, without intervention, against every statistical and medical expectation. And the daughter that was born from that pregnancy, that specific, particular, extraordinary little girl, is exactly the child that needed to come when she came. And my friend will tell you, with complete conviction, that if any of the other pregnancies had gone differently, this daughter would not exist. The timing was not a mistake. The years of waiting were not a punishment. They were the path that led to exactly this child at exactly this moment, in exactly the circumstances that were designed for her. God wasn't late. God was precise. Now, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that every season of waiting has a tidy resolution. I'm not going to tell you that faith is a formula and that if you just trust hard enough and believe firmly enough, you'll get exactly what you're hoping for in exactly the form you're hoping for it. I'm not going to sell you that because I don't believe it and I don't think you should either. What I believe, what I know, is that God is good and that his ways are higher than our ways. And that when the promise doesn't come in the form we expected, or at the time we expected, it does not mean the promise wasn't real. It means our understanding of what the promise actually was may need to expand. It means God might be answering a prayer that is bigger than the one we prayed. It means the story is not over. And I would rather stand on that truth, the messy, unresolved, still trusting, even when it doesn't make sense truth, than trade for a clean answer that doesn't hold up under real life. Because real faith is not the absence of doubt. Real faith is not the absence of questions. Real faith is not the serene, untroubled certainty of someone who has never had to wait. Real faith is what happens when you wait, and you don't understand, and it hurts, and you stay anyway. Real faith is what happens when the night is long and the morning feels impossibly far away, and you choose to hold on. That choice, that stubborn, sometimes tearful, occasionally furious, but ultimately immovable choice to trust. That is the faith that moves mountains. That is the faith that God calls righteousness. That is the faith that Abraham had when the math said impossible, and he believed anyway. I want to ask you something. Think about the thing in your life that feels the most behind, the most delayed, the most stuck. The thing you've prayed for so long that praying for it almost feels like going through the motions. The thing that you started to wonder if maybe you misheard, if maybe it wasn't really a promise, if maybe you just wanted it so badly you convinced yourself it was from God. I want you to hold that thing. Don't push it away. Don't try to talk yourself out of the pain of it. Hold it. And now I want you to consider the possibility, just the possibility, that the delay has not been punishment, that the delay has not been rejection, that the delay has not been God looking at you and deciding you're not worth it or not ready or not enough. Consider the possibility that the delay has been protection, that the delay has been preparation, that the delay has been God working on the other side of the door, arranging things, aligning things, building things that had to be built before you could walk through. Consider the possibility that what you thought was God being slow is actually God being thorough, and that thorough is infinitely better than fast. I've learned something about seasons. In nature, nothing that is genuinely alive stays the same forever. Winter looks like death. Winter looks like everything has stopped. Everything has failed. Everything is over. The trees are bare. The ground is frozen. Nothing is growing where you can see it. But under the surface, during the most brutal part of winter, the root system of those trees is doing extraordinary work. It's going deeper. It's strengthening. It's preparing for something that you can't see yet because it's underground. And then spring comes, always comes. And what was dead looking in silence suddenly erupts in more life than you could have imagined just weeks before. Not because something new started, because what was always growing finally broke through the surface. Your winter is not the end of your story. Your bare season is not your final season. Whatever is underground in your life right now, the hope you haven't given up on, the calling you haven't abandoned, the faith you're still holding even when it costs you something, that is alive. That root system is going deeper than it has ever gone, and the spring is coming. Not maybe, not possibly, coming, because that is the nature of the God we serve. He is a God of resurrection. He is a God of nevertheless. He is a God who speaks to dry bones and asks, "Can these live?" and then answers his own question. If you are watching this and you are in that dry bones place, if you feel like the light has gone out of the dream, like the vision dried up somewhere along the way, like the version of you that believes so fully and hopes so freely is a distant memory, I want to speak directly to that right now. You're not too far gone. You are not past the point of return. The story God is writing through your life does not require everything to be clean and intact and on schedule. He is the God who makes a way where there is no way. He is the God who calls things that are not as though they are. He is the God who takes the broken and makes it more beautiful than it was before it broke. He is not finished with you. He is not done with the dream. You are not behind. You are being prepared. You are not forgotten. You are being positioned. You are not late. You are right on time. Type amen in the comments if you trust God's timing over the world's timeline. And if this spoke to something in you today, share it with one person who needs to hear it. Because somewhere out there, someone is in that Walmart parking lot, crying in their car, convinced they've lost a race. And they need to know what you now know. They need to know that God's clock has never been wrong. Not once. Not ever. And it's not about to start today.